I'm too fat, sir. The words tumbled out before Luna Mitchell could stop them. But what she didn't say, what she couldn't say, was that she was also running for her life. She stood on the weathered porch of a Colorado ranch house, her carpet bag clutched in trembling hands, watching the tall rancher's expression shift from surprise to something she couldn't quite read. His eyes were blue, storm cloud blue, set in a face carved by wind and sun, and something harder. Grief, maybe. Or maybe something worse. He didn't laugh. He didn't sneer. He just looked at her. Really looked. And for the first time in 3 years, Lewis Thornton felt his heart stir with something other than emptiness. But what neither of them knew was that the danger Luna was running from was already on its way, and it was far more deadly than a man with grabbing hands. This wasn't just about a job. This was about survival. 3 weeks earlier, Luna had been standing in a different doorway in a railroad town 2 territories away. The boarding house owner, Mr. Garrett, had cornered her in the narrow hallway again, his whiskey breath hot on her neck, his hands reaching for her waist. "You owe me," he'd hissed, and it wasn't just about the back rent. She'd pushed past him, heart hammering, knowing she couldn't stay another day, not another hour. The man thought her body was his for the taking, simply because she worked for him, simply because she was alone in the world with nowhere else to go. Her husband, Daniel, had been dead 2 years. A good man, she told herself. A gentle, kind man. But his death in a logging accident had left behind debts she couldn't pay, and a past she had to keep buried. She was too fat for the dress shop, too fat to serve tables at the nice hotel, too visible for a town that preferred their women small and silent. The advertisement had been a godsend, a whisper of hope in a world that had none. Rancher seeks housekeeper, Colorado territory, room, board, fair wages. She'd lied on her application, of course, left out the part about Mr. Garrett, left out the real reason she had to leave town so fast. She made herself sound efficient, invisible, sexless. The train had been torture. Passengers stared. A thin woman had moved seats rather than sit beside her. The stagecoach from Leadville had been worse. Cramped quarters where every bump pressed her against strangers who shifted away as if her size were contagious. By the time the driver dropped her at the end of a long dirt road leading to the Thorn Ranch, Luna's courage had shriveled to almost nothing. She'd walked that last mile in the afternoon heat, dust coating her black traveling dress, her feet screaming in boots that pinched. The ranch house appeared gradually, small, weathered, sitting alone in a valley with mountains rising purple in the distance. Beautiful and isolated, but the house looked neglected, like nobody had cared about it in years. Paint peeling, porch sagging slightly, windows that needed washing. It looked like a place that held secrets. Her carefully prepared speech had evaporated the moment the rancher opened the door. He was tall, broad-shouldered, maybe 38 or 40, with dark hair touched with gray at the temples, handsome in a hard, closed-off way. He'd looked at her standing there, all of her, the rounded hips and full bosom and soft arms, and she panicked. Better to say it first, before he could. Better to name the thing that made her unacceptable. "I'm too fat, sir, but I can cook." For a long moment, he just stared. Then something in his expression softened just a fraction. "I'm Lewis Thornton," he said quietly. "You must be Miss Mitchell. Come inside." The house was worse than she'd imagined. Not dirty, but joyless, like a place where someone existed but didn't live. The front room had furniture covered in dust sheets, as if for a funeral that never ended. The kitchen was a bachelor's nightmare. Dishes stacked unwashed. A stove that hadn't been properly cleaned in months. But as she took it all in, she saw something else. On the floor, near the back door, was a dark stain. Too dark for spilled coffee. And under the edge of a loose floorboard, something glinted. A small silver button, like one from a woman's dress. "My wife died 3 years ago," Lewis said from the doorway, his voice flat, startling her. "Childbirth. I've been managing on my own since then." He cleared his throat. "I have 2 ranch hands who eat in the bunkhouse. I eat here, alone." Luna's heart twisted. She recognized that tone. The sound of a man drowning in loneliness. I can give you a week's trial, he continued, not quite meeting her eyes. Cook, clean, manage the household, fair wages. If it works out, the position is permanent. If not, he shrugged. No hard feelings. That's more than fair, Mr. Thornton, Luna said, setting down her carpetbag. She didn't dare look at the stain on the floor again. He nodded and left her there, his boots heavy on the wooden floor. Through the window, she watched him cross to the barn, his shoulders tight with tension. Luna turned to survey her new kingdom, this sad kitchen that smelled of old coffee and secrets. 1 week. She had 1 week to prove she was worth keeping. 1 week to convince him that she could make this house a home. But a small, cold voice in the back of her mind wondered what had happened to the last woman who lived in this house. In the barn, Lewis Thornton leaned against a stall door, his hand pressed to his chest. He'd told her Margaret died in childbirth. It was a simple lie, an easy one. The truth was so much uglier. The truth was that Margaret had died in the kitchen, her blood on the floorboards he could never seem to scrub clean enough, a silver button torn from her dress in the struggle. The doctor had called it a tragic fall. But Lewis knew better. He knew she'd been running from someone. He just didn't know who. And when he'd looked at Luna Mitchell standing on his porch, with her frightened eyes and desperate plea, he'd seen the same hunted look his wife had worn in her final days. The advertisement hadn't been for a housekeeper. Not really. It had been bait. And he was terrified that the predator he was hunting had just sent him the perfect victim. Luna woke at 4 a.m, her body protesting from the unfamiliar mattress. She dressed quickly and made her way to the kitchen by lamplight. While the stove heated, she explored the cupboards more thoroughly. In the back of a drawer, beneath a stack of old dish towels, her fingers brushed against a small, leather-bound book. A diary. She pulled it out. The lock was broken. Inside, the handwriting was elegant, feminine. Margaret Thornton's. Luna knew she shouldn't, but her hand trembled as she opened it to the last entry. The ink was slightly smeared, the words hurried. He knows. He was in town today, and he saw me. He said he wouldn't let me go. Lewis must never find out the truth about the baby. The entry ended there. The baby? Lewis had said they lost the baby. Luna's blood ran cold. She shoved the diary back into the drawer just as she heard the bunkhouse door slam. By 5:30, the kitchen smelled like heaven. Fresh bread, sizzling bacon, strong coffee. The 2 ranch hands, an older man named Buck and a younger one named Tom, stopped dead at the door. Sweet Jesus, Buck breathed. Is that actual food? They ate like starving men. Lewis came in last, freezing in the doorway just as they had. He looked from the clean table to Luna, and for a moment, his hard expression wavered. She served him a plate, her hands steady despite the secrets churning in her stomach. He took a bite of the eggs, and his eyes closed. When he opened them again, they were bright with unshed tears. Margaret used to... He couldn't finish. He just shook his head and ate, his shoulders slumping with a grief so profound it felt like a physical weight in the room. Luna turned back to the stove, her heart hammering. She'd passed the first test, but now she knew this wasn't just a house of grief, it was a house of lies. The second day, she scrubbed the kitchen from top to bottom. When she got to the dark stain on the floor, she used lye soap and a stiff brush until her knuckles were raw, until the wood was pale and clean. As she worked, she felt Lewis watching her from the doorway. He didn't say a word, but when she glanced up, his face was unreadable, his eyes fixed on the spot she was cleaning with a terrifying intensity. On the third day, she was reaching for a high shelf, standing on her toes, when he was suddenly behind her. His hands went to her waist, lifting her slightly. His touch was firm, respectful, but it sent a shock through her. For a heartbeat he didn't let go, and she could feel the heat of him, smell the scent of leather and soap. When he stepped back, his face was a mask of confusion, as if he'd surprised himself. That night, he stayed in the kitchen after dinner, drying the dishes as she washed. They made small talk, but the air was thick with unspoken things. And Luna couldn't stop thinking about the diary. Lewis must never find out the truth about the baby. What truth? On the 5th day, Buck made a clumsy comment. You move real nice for a big gal. he said, meaning it as a compliment. Before Luna could react, Louis was on his feet, his chair scraping violently against the floor. You will speak to Miss Mitchell with respect, or you'll find work elsewhere. Are we clear? His voice was cold steel. Buck stammered an apology, his face pale. Luna stood frozen by the stove. No one had ever defended her like that. Later, on the porch, he asked her why she'd said she was too fat. She told him the truth, about her husband's death, about the world seeing her as too much, about the boarding house owner. She didn't give his name, but she saw the murder that flickered in Louis's eyes. He hurt you, Louis said, his voice quiet and dangerous. He tried, she whispered. That's why I left. I see a woman who brings life wherever she goes, he said, his voice rough. Who took a dead house and made it warm again. The kind of grace that makes broken things feel like they might heal. His words were a balm on her wounded soul, but they were also a warning. He saw her as a healer. What would he see if he knew she was hiding his dead wife's secrets? Day 6, the last day of her trial week. After an elaborate dinner, Louis asked her to sit at the table. His face was grim. Miss Mitchell, he began, I need to speak with you about your future here. This was it, the rejection. I want you to stay, he said, the words landing like stones in the quiet room. Permanently. Relief washed over her so fast she felt dizzy. Yes, she breathed. Yes, I'll stay. He nodded, then took a breath like a man about to jump off a cliff. There's a town social next week. Would you accompany me? A social, with him, where everyone would see them together. She didn't know what to say, what to think. Was this pity? Or was it something more? Yes, she heard herself say. I'd be honored. He left her at the table, his expression unreadable, and Luna wondered if she'd just agreed to the best thing in her life, or a trap she couldn't see yet. That night she couldn't sleep. She crept back into the kitchen, pulled out the diary, and read more. Margaret wrote of a man from her past, a man she feared, a man who had followed her to Colorado. He says the child is his. He threatens to tell Louis everything. I don't know what to do. I should never have come here. Luna's blood turned to ice. The baby hadn't been Louis's. That was the secret. And the man from Margaret's past, was he the one who had killed her? And if so, did Louis know? Was his hunt for a killer a hunt for his wife's lover? The thought was sickening. The next day, Louis went to town for supplies. While he was gone, a rider appeared at the end of the long dirt road. He was a big man, with a cruel face and a proprietary air. He stopped his horse and just stared at the house, a slow, ugly smile spreading across his lips. It was him, Mr. Garrett, the man she'd fled. He hadn't followed her. He'd been coming here all along, and he wasn't looking for Luna. He was looking for Margaret. Well, well, look what we have here. Mr. Garrett's voice was a greasy slick of satisfaction. He dismounted, his eyes crawling over Luna, then flicking to the house with a look of ownership. Didn't expect to find you here, Luna, though I can't say I'm surprised. You always did have a knack for finding a soft place to land. Luna stood frozen on the porch, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. What do you want, Mr. Garrett? What do I want? He laughed, a short, barking sound. I came for what's mine. She owed me big. He was talking about Margaret. It had to be. He was the man from the diary. There's nothing for you here, Luna said, her voice shaking but firm. You need to leave. Oh, I'm not going anywhere. He took a step onto the porch, crowding her space. This place was supposed to be mine. Me and Maggie had a plan. Thornton's little accident was supposed to clear the way. He was talking about killing Louis. The thought made her sick. But she got sentimental, tried to back out. Can't have that. Suddenly, Louis was there. He moved with a chilling silence, appearing at the corner of the house like a ghost. Garrett spun around, his hand instinctively going to the pistol at his hip, but he was too slow. Lewis's fist connected with Garrett's jaw in a sickening crunch of bone. Garrett went down hard, sprawling in the dust. Lewis stood over him, his body radiating a cold, lethal fury Luna had never seen before. "You're not welcome on my land," Lewis said, his voice dangerously low. "Get up, get on your horse, and if I ever see your face again, I'll kill you." Garrett scrambled to his feet, spitting blood. He looked from Lewis's murderous face to Luna's terrified one. "This ain't over, Thornton," he snarled. "You think you know what happened to your pretty little wife? You don't know the half of it. Ask your new housekeeper. She seems to know all about keeping secrets." He hauled himself onto his horse and galloped away, leaving a cloud of dust and unanswered questions hanging in the air. Lewis turned to Luna, his expression a mixture of rage and concern. "Are you all right? Did he hurt you?" "I'm fine," she whispered, her whole body trembling. "Lewis, who was that?" But she already knew. "His name is Samuel Garrett," Lewis said, his jaw tight. "He used to own the saloon in town. Sold it a couple of years back. Margaret. She knew him from back east. He wouldn't meet her eyes. He was lying. Or at least, not telling her the whole truth. The town social is tomorrow night," he said, abruptly changing the subject. "We're still going." It wasn't a question. It was a command. He was using the social, using her to send a message. To Garrett? To the whole town? She didn't know. All she knew was that she was caught in the middle of something far deadlier than she had ever imagined. The dress he'd bought her fabric for felt like a costume for a play she didn't understand. A beautiful deep blue cotton she'd sewn by hand in the evenings, with Lewis sitting nearby, watching her. The silence between them growing heavier with each stitch. The wagon ride into town was tense. Lewis was a coiled spring of silent anger beside her. As they pulled up to the town hall, every head turned. Women whispered behind their hands. One of them, a sharp-faced woman named Evelyn Hartwell, intercepted them. "Lewis," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness, ignoring Luna completely. "How wonderful to see you out. And with your staff." Her eyes raked over Luna, a cruel smirk on her lips. "So difficult to find ready-made clothing in certain sizes." The insult was a physical blow. Luna felt the blood rush to her face. She wanted to run. But Lewis's hand was a vice on her elbow. Then he did something that shocked the entire town. He took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers in a possessive, public gesture. "If you'll excuse us, Evelyn," he said, his voice cold. "I promised Miss Mitchell the first dance." He led her onto the dance floor, pulling her into his arms. The room went silent except for the fiddles. "People are watching," Luna whispered, mortified. "Good," he said, his voice a low growl in her ear. "Let them watch." They moved together, a solitary island in a sea of staring faces. "You're beautiful, Luna," he murmured, his eyes burning into hers. "And I'm going to spend my life proving it to you, if you'll let me." She stumbled and his arms tightened, holding her steady. "Lewis, what are you doing?" "I'm courting you," he said, his voice clear and loud enough for everyone to hear. "The whole town can know it. I'm courting Luna Mitchell, and I don't give a damn what anyone thinks." Tears welled in her eyes. It was too much, too fast. It felt like a desperate move, a shield against the town's scorn and Garrett's threats. She opened her mouth to answer him, but before she could speak, a man burst through the doors. "Fire!" he yelled. "Fire at the Miller Ranch! The barn's fully caught!" The room exploded into chaos. Lewis dropped her hands, his face shifting into a mask of grim determination. "I have to go." "I'm coming with you," Luna said, grabbing his arm. "I can cook. They'll need feeding." He looked at her, a flicker of pride in his eyes, and nodded. They ran for the wagon together. But as they raced out of town, a terrible thought struck Luna. What if the fire wasn't an accident? What if it was a distraction? A way to draw every able-bodied man out of town, leaving it defenseless? Leaving her defenseless. The Miller Ranch was a vision of hell. Flames licked the night sky, and the air was thick with smoke and shouting. Lewis joined the bucket brigade without a second thought, disappearing into the chaos. Luna found Mrs. Miller, her face a blank mask of shock, and took charge of the kitchen, organizing the other women into a ruthlessly efficient team. She worked until her back screamed and her hands were raw, driven by a desperate energy. This was what she was good at, creating order out of chaos. She saw Louis twice, his face blackened with soot. Their eyes met across the swirling inferno, and in that moment, a silent understanding passed between them. They were a team. As dawn approached, the fire was finally contained. The barn was a smoking ruin, but the house had been saved. Exhausted men stumbled toward the house, and Luna was there with hot stew and fresh coffee. She was ladling a bowl when the world tilted. The ground rushed up to meet her, and the last thing she heard was Louis shouting her name. She woke 16 hours later in her bed at the ranch. Louis was beside her, looking haggard and terrified. "The doctor said it was exhaustion," he said, his voice rough. "You scared the hell out of me, Luna." He paced the room, his movements agitated. "When you collapsed, all I could think was that I'd lost you. Just like I lost her." He turned, his face raw with a pain that stunned her. "I can't pretend anymore. You're not just my housekeeper. What I feel for you isn't just gratitude." He dropped to his knees beside the bed, taking her hands. His were calloused and stained with soot. "I love you, Luna. I'm terrified to feel it, but I do." Tears streamed down her face. "You don't mean that." "I do," he insisted, his voice fierce. "I love your strength, your laugh, your softness. I love all of it." He brought her hands to his lips. "Marry me. Let me spend my life proving to you what I see when I look at you." The words she'd been holding back burst out of her. "I can't have children," she sobbed. "An illness when I was young. I can't give you an heir." He flinched, but not for the reason she expected. "Luna, stop," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I lost Margaret and our son in one night. He never took a breath. I am terrified of losing someone I love that way again. What you see is a burden. To me, it's a blessing." He meant it. She could see it in his tear-filled eyes. He wasn't just accepting her. He was relieved. "Marry me, Luna Mitchell," he whispered. "Please." "Yes," she sobbed. "Yes, Louis." He kissed her then, a kiss that tasted of smoke and salt and desperate promises. It was everything she'd ever wanted. But as he held her, a cold dread snaked through her joy. He had said he lost his son, but Margaret's diary had said the baby wasn't his. One of them was lying, and Luna was about to marry a man she didn't know at all. They set the wedding for 3 weeks out. The announcement in the town paper split the community. The Millers and others she'd helped at the fire were warm and congratulatory. But Evelyn Hartwell led the chorus of whispers, painting Luna as a gold-digging opportunist. The scorn followed her everywhere, a constant biting reminder that she didn't belong. When the town seamstress refused to make her a wedding dress, citing a full schedule and the extra fabric Luna would require, the humiliation was sharp and deep. She decided to make her own, cutting the simple cream-colored cotton on the kitchen table, each stitch a prayer that this wasn't all a terrible mistake. Louis found her sewing, his face hardening when he realized what had happened. "I'm sorry," he said, his hands clenched into fists. "This town is full of small-minded people. You deserve better." "It's what I'm used to," she said, her voice flat. "Well, I expect different," he shot back. "You're the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. And on our wedding day, I'm going to prove it to you." A week before the wedding, the doubts were screaming in her head. She had found the diary. She knew Louis was lying about the baby. She knew Garrett was the man Margaret had feared. But what did Louis know? Was he a grieving husband seeking justice, or a killer covering his tracks? The day Garrett had shown up, Louis's violence had been swift and brutal. Was that the act of a man protecting his home, or silencing a threat? She couldn't shake the image of the stain on the kitchen floor. "What if it's just us at the church?" she asked Louis one evening on the porch. "Then it's just us," he said simply. "I don't care what this town thinks. I only care what you think. Do you want to marry me?" "Yes." she whispered, the word tasting like both a promise and a lie. How could she marry a man she suspected of murder? But how could she survive if she left? The morning of the wedding, Luna felt like she was walking to her own execution. Buck and Tom, her self-appointed protectors, drove her to the church. As she stood on the steps, her heart hammered against her ribs. She pushed open the door. The church wasn't empty. It was full. The Millers, the ranch wives, shopkeepers, they had come. Then she saw Lewis at the altar, and the world fell away. The look on his face was one of pure, unadulterated love. It couldn't be a lie. It just couldn't. His vows were a raw, heartfelt promise to cherish her, to prove her worth. Her own vows felt like a betrayal, the words catching in her throat. As the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Lewis kissed her, a deep, claiming kiss that left her breathless. For a moment, she let herself believe. Walking back down the aisle, she saw Evelyn Hartwell in a back pew, her face a mask of pinched fury. It was more than disapproval. It was hatred. The reception at the ranch was a blur of fiddle music and congratulations. As the sun set and the last guests departed, they were finally alone. Lewis led her into their bedroom. He was gentle, patient, his eyes full of a tenderness that melted her fear. This was real. His love was real. That night, she finally felt safe. The next morning, Luna woke up in her husband's arms. For the first time in years, she felt a sliver of peace. While Lewis was out checking the fences, she decided to burn the diary. It was time to let the past go. She retrieved it from its hiding place and took it to the kitchen stove. As she opened it one last time, a piece of folded paper tucked into the back cover fell out. It was a letter, in Margaret's frantic script. "Dearest Lewis," it began, "if you are reading this, then Garrett has made good on his threats. The baby is not yours. I was a fool, and he trapped me. But that is not the secret I must tell you. Garrett did not act alone. He had help, someone in town who wanted you for themselves, someone who told him when you would be away, someone who gave him the poison. It was supposed to look like an accident. I tried to fight him, but I was too weak. Do not trust her, Lewis. She has always been obsessed with you. She will not stop until she has you, and she will kill anyone who stands in her way." It was Evelyn. Luna dropped the letter as if it were on fire. Evelyn Hartwell. The poison. Margaret hadn't fallen. She hadn't been attacked in a struggle. She'd been poisoned, and Lewis had been the intended target. Garrett was just the instrument. Evelyn was the monster. And Evelyn had been at their wedding, watching them. A cold, terrifying realization dawned on Luna. The wedding hadn't been the end of the threat. It was the beginning of Evelyn's new war. And Luna was now the one standing in her way. She heard boots on the porch. Lewis was back. But as he opened the door, she saw another figure behind him. It was Evelyn Hartwell, a pie in her hands, and a smile on her face as sharp and deadly as a razor. "A wedding gift," Evelyn said, her eyes fixed on Luna. "I do hope you're hungry." "How thoughtful, Evelyn," Lewis said, oblivious to the terror gripping Luna. "Come in, come in." Evelyn stepped into the kitchen, her smile never wavering, but her eyes were cold, dead things. She set the pie on the table, a perfect, golden-crusted apple pie that smelled of cinnamon and murder. "I thought we should let bygones be bygones," Evelyn said, her gaze locked on Luna. "We're all neighbors after all. And I want you to be happy, Lewis. Truly." Luna's mind raced. The letter was still on the floor by the stove, half hidden by her skirts. She had to warn Lewis. But how? Evelyn was watching her every move. "Why, thank you, Evelyn," Luna said, forcing her voice to remain steady. "I'll get some plates." She moved to the cupboard, her back to them, her hands trembling so badly she could barely grasp the china. She could feel Evelyn's stare, like a physical weight. She was a cornered animal. If she showed Evelyn the letter, Evelyn might have a gun. If she screamed, Lewis might not believe her. He saw Evelyn as a meddling gossip, not a killer. "Let me help you with that," Evelyn said, suddenly right behind her. Luna flinched as Evelyn reached past her for the plates, her perfume cloying and sweet. "You seem a little flustered, dear. Wedding night jitters?" The threat was unmistakable. I know you know. Say one word and you're next. Louis was still by the door, pulling off his boots. Luna's just not used to so much company, he said with a small smile. We appreciate the gesture, Evelyn. Luna turned, plates in hand, a desperate plan forming in her mind. She set the plates on the table, then accidentally knocked her own water glass over, sending a cascade of water across the table, soaking the front of Evelyn's expensive dress. "Oh my goodness, I am so clumsy!" Luna exclaimed, grabbing a dish towel. "Evelyn, you're soaked. Let me help you." She began dabbing at Evelyn's dress, forcing the other woman to turn, to be distracted. As Evelyn hissed in irritation, Luna shot a panicked look at Louis and jerked her head subtly toward the stove, toward the letter on the floor. Louis frowned, confused. He saw the letter, a white square against the dark wood. He started to move toward it. "Really, it's quite all right," Evelyn snapped, pushing Luna's hands away. Her eyes darted from Luna to Louis, sensing the shift in the room. Her smile tightened. "Well, I can see you two lovebirds want to be alone. I'll just leave this here for you." She started for the door. "Evelyn, wait," Louis said. His voice had changed. The warmth was gone, replaced by a chilling quiet. He had picked up the letter. He was reading it. Evelyn saw the letter in his hand, and her mask of civility shattered. Her face contorted into a snarl of pure hatred. "She was a weak, stupid fool," she spat, her eyes blazing at Louis. "She never deserved you. I loved you. I was the one who should have been your wife." She reached into her handbag, and Luna screamed, "Louis, she has a gun!" Evelyn pulled out a small derringer just as Louis launched himself at her. He didn't try to grab the gun. He threw the heavy kitchen table sideways, knocking her off her feet. The gun went off, the shot deafening in the small room, blasting a hole in the ceiling. Plaster dust rained down. Luna grabbed the heaviest cast-iron skillet from the stove. Evelyn scrambled up, trying to aim the gun again, but Louis was on her, wrestling for the weapon. They crashed against the cupboards, dishes rattling, the pie sliding to the floor in a heap of shattered pastry. Evelyn was wiry and strong, fueled by insane fury. She brought her knee up hard into Louis's groin, and he grunted in pain, his grip loosening for a fraction of a second. It was all the time she needed. She twisted the gun toward his chest. Luna didn't think. She acted. She swung the heavy skillet with all her strength, connecting with the side of Evelyn's head. There was a sickening thud, and Evelyn crumpled to the floor unconscious. Silence. The only sounds were Louis's ragged breaths and the frantic hammering of Luna's own heart. The skillet fell from her numb fingers, clattering onto the floor beside Evelyn's still form. Louis stared at Evelyn, then at Luna, his face a mask of shock and dawning horror. He looked at the letter, still clutched in his hand, then back at his new wife, who stood, trembling but resolute, with a cooking pan in her hand, having just saved his life. "It was her," he whispered, the pieces clicking into place with brutal clarity. "All this time, it was her." "She poisoned Margaret," Luna said, her voice shaking. "She was trying to kill you." He crossed the room in 2 strides and pulled her into his arms, burying his face in her hair. He held her so tightly she could barely breathe. "You saved me," he murmured against her skin. "I thought I was protecting you, but you were the one protecting me." They tied Evelyn up with rope from the pantry. When the sheriff arrived, summoned by a frantic Tom who had heard the gunshot from the barn, he found a scene of utter chaos. A bound, raving woman, a shattered kitchen, and a rancher holding his new wife as if he'd never let her go. The truth, once revealed, spread through the town like wildfire. Evelyn Hartwell's obsession, her manipulation of Garrett, the cold-blooded murder plot, it was a sickness that had festered in their midst for years. Garrett was apprehended 2 days later, and in exchange for a lighter sentence, he confessed to everything, corroborating the story in Margaret's letter. The town was rocked by the scandal, but in its wake came a wave of shame and regret. They had misjudged Luna, ostracized her, believed the lies of a murderer over the evidence of their own eyes. The apologies came in a slow but steady stream. A pie from one neighbor, a bolt of fabric from another. quiet words of respect from men in the street. They had seen her strength, her courage. They had seen who she truly was. A month later, Luna stood on the porch of the ranch house, her hand resting on her still flat stomach. The doctor in town, a kind old man, had confirmed it after she'd fainted one morning. The childhood illness hadn't made her barren after all. It had been another lie, told by a country doctor who didn't know any better. She was pregnant. She watched as Louis rode in from the fields, his face breaking into a wide, genuine smile when he saw her. The haunted look was gone, replaced by a deep and abiding peace. He swung down from his horse and took her in his arms, his hand going to her belly with a gentle reverence that made her heart ache with joy. "He told me he was terrified of losing a woman in childbirth," she said quietly. "Are you scared?" Louis looked into her eyes, his own shining with love and a little bit of fear, but a healthy fear, not the crippling terror of his past. "I'm scared of not having a long enough life to love you both," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You and this baby. You're not a burden. You're a blessing. You're my redemption." He kissed her then, a slow, deep kiss under the vast Colorado sky. They had both come to this place broken and haunted by the past, two lonely souls searching for a safe harbor. They had found it not in a place, but in each other. Their love story wasn't a fairy tale. It was something better. It was real. If this story of a love that defied all expectations touched your heart, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because the tales of courage and redemption we have coming next are ones you won't want to miss.